of this story on Monday, March 7th, the day in which oil prices went briefly above $135 a barrel in early trade in Asia this morning. They're now trading just around 130 on Brent, a little bit below. Let's welcome in our Monday morning quarterback, so to speak, Omar Najia, Global Head of Derivatives at BB Energy. Omar, are you having fun yet? This is the wild ride.
Yeah, we've had, obviously it's good, but again, the trend is your friend, and never try and call a top. So you just basically wait and wait and wait and wait. Eventually, everything blows up. But until then, had you taken your money, last week, you'd miss a $10 a barrel today. Had you taken your money the week before, you'd miss another $10 a barrel. And had you taken your money, blah, blah. So I think there's a misconception in the market that this is, this will last another month, 2 months, whatever it is, then everything dies down, blah, 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 blah. I'm not talking about Ukraine, but I think geopolitically stuff has changed forever. So I really don't expect things to go back to normal at all, ever.
Bloomberg are leading with a headline this morning, $200 oil. There's market moves, options being taken on that this morning. Is that what you're doing this morning, Omar?
No, if you see it in Bloomberg News, you want to try and avoid it, basically, right? So no, I don't want $200. I have my positions. I'll just wait until it gets so ridiculously high that you can't help but cash out. But no, I don't want to be. I've tried to explain that commodity markets always form inverse V tops. So it goes really, really high, then it comes crashing down again. It doesn't go kind of sideways. I think we're a long way off the high, at least until the end of March in terms of time. Maybe into April, maybe even into May. I don't know. But there's no reason for you to take your money. I mean, everything's messed. They've sanctioned Russia, banks, vessels, you name it, they've sanctioned it. There's they're talking, should we sanction Russian oil? It doesn't matter because nobody wants to touch the stuff. And even Shell, I mean, there was a famous story, Shell bought Urals cargo, blah, blah, blah. They're now sending out press releases apologizing. Like, we're really sorry, we bought, blah, blah, blah. Because, it's quite interesting. The Ukraine now is basically a holy thing. So basically, you can't touch anything to do with Russia, not because of sanctions, but just because of reputational risk. So Shell are very, very apologetic.
Well, let's take that point, because ultimately, I think it's interesting this morning that we have somebody from Turkey, somebody from China on the podcast, because ultimately, as you say, Omar, it's coming to a point where you have to choose, and Turkey and China have been kind of hedging their bets up till now. Which team are they on? Clearly, China has been signaling they're on the Russia team. Turkey has been a little bit vague, but it obviously is a NATO member. Let's go to Turkey with Mehmet Ogucu, who's the Group CEO, Global Resources Partnership, and is chairman of the London Energy Club. Mehmet, where do you think Turkey now stands on this equation, and can they do the unthinkable and end up siding with Russia rather than the West and NATO?
Well, I don't think it's that simple. If you look at the fundamentals, Turkey is facing a very difficult choice because Turkey depends heavily on Russia for its energy imports. 98% of natural gas has to be imported in Turkey, 95% for oil, and excessively come from Russia. And also 80% of Turkish grain imports come from either Ukraine or Russia. And so tourism-wise as well, 1 in every 4 tourists coming from Russia or Ukraine. So the interdependency is so strong. Of course, you can say the same thing for the European Union as well in many ways. But it's a grouping of, nations, 28 nations, which can perhaps take collective actions to ease the pain. However, if Turkey has to make a choice, I think it has already made some choices in the context of NATO. And so Turkey, I think, is going to favor the Western camp because I think what Ukraine is suffering right now might be replicated in Kazakhstan, in Caucasus, in Transnistria, even with Turkey, because Turkey doesn't trust Russia. Russia doesn't trust Turkey. We remember the great Peter the Great, which we call Peter the Mad, and Putin says, my historical role model is Peter the Great. That's a dangerous signal for Turkey because after the Second World War, Stalin wanted to capture some of the Turkish eastern provinces, as well as controlling the Bosphorus and Dardanelles. So we haven't forgotten that. We haven't forgotten that 2015, Turkish F-16 fighters shot down a Russian Su-24 on the Turkish-Syrian border. So there is always the risk of crisis, but Turkey knew how to manage it because of the personal chemistry established between Erdogan and Putin. But if a choice is going to be made, I think, as you said, we are leading to this fateful decision. I think Turkey will definitely take part together with its NATO allies. And I'm not sure how Turkey will be faithful or loyal to the number of sanctions already imposed on Russia, because it's a difficult situation. Turkish economy is already in dire straits. If there's going to be a further blow to its trade, investment, and supplies coming from Russia, who is going to help Turkey? That's the critical question in my view.
Well, we'll come back to that because it could be a moment for Turkey to really rehabilitate itself after a number of years of being a little bit out in the cold. Let's go to China, to Victor Yang, senior editor at JLC Network Technology. I appreciate, Victor, there's parameters to what we can discuss ultimately, but how vulnerable is China, do you think, to $130 oil? How long can it sustain this scale of inflation and not have a serious economic impact?
Well, in China, we had this kind of pricing mechanism for gasoline and diesel. That's when crude is above $130 per barrel, the country will not address its gasoline and diesel prices, which means refining margins will shrink quite significantly. And particularly for independent refiners, because they do not have the subsidies from the government when the price is above the level. And they are already cutting imports, while saying for April arrival now, because of the possible risk with crude from Russia. Say some refiners, independent refiners, import a lot of export blend, and they worry about the problems with shipping and other issues. So they are planning on some other grade, but the cost will drop. Say grades from the US, from the West Africa, and some other countries and regions as well. So this is kind of dampening demand from China already. And in the first 2 months of this year, the country's imports were dropped by 4.9%. The data just came out today. But this was not because of the
countries. Sorry, Victor. Just to clarify, China's oil imports in January and February were down 4%. Is that correct?
4.9%. 4.9% year on year. The data just came out today, and but this was not because of the sanctions yet. Because in January and February, independent refiners cut their operating rates to quite low levels because of the environmental protection before and around the Beijing Winter Olympics. Say in Shandong, the biggest province by independent refining capacity, the operating rate in the middle of February dropped to a 22-month low, and they arrange for very much a lot of maintenance for the first 2 months. That's quite different from usual. Usually, March, April will be the peak maintenance season in China. And that's what state-run refineries are going to do this year too. From March and April, they will have long-term maintenance. But independence maintenance will drop in March and April. So this would cause kind of balance between the maintenance. And
So we're kind of on target for another year of declining imports. If we're already down 5% in January and February, and we're going into the maintenance season, it would indicate that this will be a second year, perhaps, of declining imports.
Well, it's quite possible if crude price stay at, say, not just this level, maybe just about $100. It would be a negative impact. China store up on crude in 2020, and there's still some crude to be consumed. And even last year, it didn't consume the stock it built up in 2020. So this kind of offers another option. Yes.
Right. Omar,
could I ask you a question here about China? Because, IEA member countries, as you know, release about 60 million barrels of oil from their strategic reserves.
They announced that.
They announced that. And how much of strategic reserves in stocks China has? Because normally IEA member countries have 90 days of stocks available, imports available in their stocks. Would they have a similar structure in China, keeping 90 days or 120 days of imports?
Well, the government made plans, a few years ago for about this level of reserves, but it has kept this data secretly, so it doesn't say how much crude it has in store now. But it would tell the market, tell people how much crude we are releasing from the reserves. Last year, it released one batch of crude from the reserves, but it was quite small and didn't make much impact on the market.
Omar, I just wanted to come back to you on the sort of narrative before this crisis in Ukraine. And obviously you were also advocating it kind of a year and two halves. The first few months were going to be robust in terms of price, and then it was going to fall off. Is that still a framework you think is in play here? And how, just let's take that first, and then I'd like to follow up.
Yeah, so basically, like I've said many times, I think markets are driven by sentiment. So it's like when you get when you were a bit sad, then you get like, okay, I'm normal now. Then you get happy. Then you get extra especially happy. Then you get euphoric. And after you get euphoric, you kind of, there's nothing more. So there's basically, it's a down. You come off from the euphoria and the market falls. So yes.
In terms of this level of price, as you said, $10 the week before, you $10 this week, you $10 next week, perhaps. From a pure demand destruction point, or how sustainable is this? What cracks first? It seems like something has to give in the coming period.
So I've got emails going back to December. Of people telling me like, we're going to sell this because it's unsustainable, and we're going to sell that because that's also unsustainable. And if you see the number of emails I've seen with unsustainable, it's my new word for 2022. 2021 was impossible. It's impossible. Crude's not going to rise. Blah blah blah. 2022 is unsustainable. So yeah,
well, you'd have to somewhat subscribe to the fact that $10 a week is unsustainable. No, if you've ever found the use of that word, it has to be oil prices rising $10 a week.
Well, the difference is that these $10 are not done because there's some kind of market blah blah blah. This is policy, right? So policy is doing this. It's not like an act of God or demand or supply. No. This is policy. So yes, I think basically it is very sustainable, and I think the idea, people need something to believe, it's it's going to end soon because it's unsustainable. The same with,
well, come on, something cracks first. Either the economy cracks or something, but oil prices jumping $10 a week. Mehmet, can the Turkish population sustain $10 oil price rise every week? And the economy, obviously, Turkey's more vulnerable than Europe, but ultimately, this level of inflation, what gives here? What is going to change the dynamic here? Putin withdraws, Ukraine gives up, China backs away from Putin.
Well, it looks like there is no end result right now we can see in terms of this crisis being temporary or permanent, because there is also talk of putting ban on Russian crude imports from European Union countries and USA. So it shows that the prices will go up, and the 60 million barrels of release of strategic reserves has not done much to ease the pain in the market. Therefore, I think there is an open-ended crisis now going on, and countries like Turkey, heavily dependent on imports and already suffering from the international fluctuations of prices and supply disruptions, I think will be hard pressed. And Turkish economy is already in a very bad situation, very volatile. On top of that, if you have this high inflation that will be brought by the price spikes in oil and natural gas, I think this will be unsustainable in many ways. It might lead also to social unrest, which have been under control right now. But if it continues like this, it is going to be difficult for many countries heavily dependent on imports of oil and gas to withstand. And wheat, and also tourism, foreign investment, what you have, it is going to be almost impossible to sustain the economic growth and also patience of the population. So as we have seen in some other countries, the energy price increases always lead to political and social instability. And Turkey has not suffered from this yet, but I see no end to this crisis in the foreseeable future. That means inflationary impact of these high prices will be felt across the board, almost in every sector, from transportation to foods, retail. Therefore, I don't know how any country could be able to deal with this issue, because current measures taken by European Union, USA, IEA, I think they are just minuscule compared to the magnitude of the crisis we are facing. We need a more stronger response, because we already suffered from Corona, and now climate change pressure on us, and gas prices going up, and renewables, nuclear. There are some transformation. IOCs will be suffering a lot, because when they withdrew from Russia, Shell, BP, then most recently also ExxonMobil, it is going to have a huge impact across the board in energy sector. And we cannot deal with it through a piecemeal approach. We need an international response in which China, India should also be part of it, because they are big players in the world energy markets.
Well, Victor, in terms of China's position, we had Omar saying in the green room before we opened up the call that China was the winner, or a winner at least, in this first 10 days of this crisis. Does it feel like China's a winner to you? I mean, as we said, commodity prices across the board are at record levels, record on top of records. Ultimately, how do you see the impact from the crisis economically on China?
Well, I'm afraid China is also one of the victims, to say that at least. And, the government is now adjusting its economic growth to 5.5% for this year. And part of the reason is because of the, prices, particularly crude prices, including, and, it's kind of, it's not impacting people's life much yet at this moment. But if this continues for months as well, staying above $100 a barrel for months, for 6 months, the impact would be much more significant. Because China has now kind of reserves to dig into. But if it drags on, say for 6 months, also even longer, the impact would be, we can see much more significant impact in the future.
I mean, there was, when China announced yesterday the 5.5% GDP for 2022. Obviously, as we've known in the past, that is really the declared number that always gets achieved. It's sort of it's a target, if you like. But ultimately, even though that is low from a historic perspective, a lot of international commentators were even surprised that it was that high, that the outlook by the World Bank, IMF on China is lower at 4.8% growth for this year. With the uncertainty of COVID, Hong Kong is currently completely decimated by COVID, and it's not getting the headlines as much as one would think given everything else. But how significant do you think, or is the COVID challenge for China this year in terms of economic growth and the zero tolerance policy?
Well, I think it will be more challenging than last year. Well, because we still had quite a few cities now reporting new cases every day now. And the policy is not changing anytime soon yet, but well, you know, now 85% of the Chinese people have been fully vaccinated. It's possible, say, late this year, there's kind of shift of the policy, say, when, say, more people are vaccinated and people do not have serious symptoms with the virus, it's possible for the country to maybe change some bit, but not yet, not anytime soon yet.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to the survey question and see what the view of the room is. Who's going to blink first is today's question. Given I'm going to use the word that Omar is not allowing, unsustainable, that we are going to be able to handle this level of inflation every month, every week, never mind month. I'm wondering who's going to blink first. That's my sort of thought this Monday morning. Does Russia blink because of the global sanctions and the stress that it is now under? Does Ukraine blink for the obvious reasons that they cannot, sustain under serious bombardment, massacre, and all sorts of physical injury? China blinks because it withdraws from Putin and that bromance relationship. Or indeed, does the West blink and back away, given that it needs to give Putin perhaps an off-ramp, or it doesn't have the stomach for the economic pain of $150, $140 oil commodities in general? So I'm wondering, from your perspective in this room today, who blinks first in this crisis?
Yes.
And I'd welcome your thoughts on that.
Well, if you ask me, I think since the crisis started with Ukraine, I think both Russia and the West will put pressure on Ukraine to blink and try to find a face-saving formula in which Ukraine and Russians will be seen as if they have won it. Therefore, I don't think that the West, Russia, or China will blink. So it's going to be Ukraine, I'm afraid, since it's the victim and it is also the origin of the problem that emerged. So and it
is the one, I suppose, feeling the most physical injury. Yes. Omar, you said at the beginning of this, I mean, I know it's still very much in the storm of it all, but that this is a fundamental shift, regardless of where this goes from here geopolitically. Can you just give us your thoughts on that and how that might play out economically?
So I think, I don't think there's going to be a peace between Russia and Ukraine. You can forget about that, right? They tried that for 8 years. Russia's going to take all of Ukraine and partition it, whether the West's like it or not. Inflation's going to skyrocket. The biggest people who are going to feel the pain are not the Russians or the Chinese or the Americans, but the EU. They have the West has massive debts. The difference in the EU and the US is the US has a reserve currency, so it can print money. The EU, I think, is going to feel massive pain and massive social unrest and all the rest of it. So that's the way I view it. I think, when you...
Do you think the West blinks first in this equation? I mean, just to keep it in a simple term.
Yeah, but also don't forget, the West has said that we want to try, I think it was Boris Johnson, we want to try Putin at The Hague. You get it? It's not like, so the West in general, you've got NATO and all the stuff that NATO's done, all the rest of it. Now they want to try him at The Hague. So you tell me, what do you think is going to happen? You think basically, and also if Russia falls, China falls, they're not stupid. People are not stupid. Okay, so I think for people who think that this is all going to blow over and somebody's going to blink, no. I think basically this is a struggle for the future of whatever you want to call it, financial system, the world, whatever economic system, whatever it is. And it is between China and Russia, because when you don't understand somebody, you call him nuts. That's not analysis. That's just, you don't understand. So I think Putin and China have a strategic relationship. I think Russia did everything it could to basically, before it went into Ukraine, because it knew and it planned and blah, blah, blah. And I think this is the kickoff of a new battle for dominance of the world, for the actual breakup of the system that we have now, which is the West and the quote unquote rules-based system where the best.
So that's how you're trading, basically, based on that analysis. Victor, your thoughts on I mean, not to get into the whole sort of space there, but ultimately the sustainability. This was a year where China clearly wanted stability and quiet ahead of the National Congress in October. It doesn't look like that quiet, at least. I mean, nothing is coming into China, but ultimately the economic and geopolitical stability seems to be not there at the moment. Is that likely to impact China policy?
Well, yes, we are trying to get stability. Yes, right. For this year, that's the most the priority. But this will make more significant impacts over the coming months if this continues well. And say, as we mentioned just now, say like the price and the geopolitical tensions, will say now it's like crazy, the West and all of the other countries are attacking Russia. But when we look back, when the United States invaded Iraq, Afghanistan, or some other countries, well, what did they say? Well, so a few days ago, I saw a video about a Russian saying that, well, China is almost the only one that is not attacking us now. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of, a difficult situation to maintain this relation with Russia without offending some others that are sanctioning Russia. So it's quite a challenge too, yes.
Yes.
You wonder in the end, will China have to choose? Let's just get the result of the survey and give Mehmet the last word this morning. Survey spread across the four options, but Russia blinking first, Ukraine, China, and the West not far behind. Yes, Mehmet, please, your closing thoughts.
Yes. Well, since now we are, of course, blinded by the ongoing tragedy in Ukraine and also the competition between Russia and the West, I don't think we should forget the underlying reason, what's happening in the bigger geopolitical play. It's between US and China. Yeah. So as soon as this crisis is over, we will turn again to US-China bigger competition on the international scene. And there, China is also feeling the same sense of insecurity, containment policy of the West vis-a-vis China. Therefore, whatever is happening to Russia today, tomorrow China will be subjected, most likely to the same. But China has a greater power to perhaps to deal with this issue. Also, Xi Jinping, I think, is very wise and clever not to jump the wagon with Russia, because it has a bigger ambitions in the global system. Its relations with the West is quite important, more important than its relations with Russia, perhaps, in some respect. Only a sense of insecurity, perhaps, they are joined together. Don't forget also Iran. whether Iran will be joining the camp of China and Russia, which seems to be the case right now, but you never know after the nuclear deal, and whether also Iranian oil and gas will be flowing into the market to make up the loss from Russia. So there are so many issues, geopolitical, economic, of not only today, but also you have to see 10 years down the road. In this regard, China will need stability, its peaceful rise until 2049, as we know. And therefore, I think we shouldn't simplify our approach to the challenges that we are facing right now.
Mehmet, you might just give us your own analysis on how, in terms of the Middle East, the wider Middle East, we've been seeing the some elements of bilateral rapprochement between Turkey and Saudi Arabia and Egypt, and Saudi even meeting with Iran, and where this big sort of big picture geopolitical event, does it also force these countries to choose, or how do you see the dynamic regionally?
And it's not coincidence that this is happening right now. I mean, Israeli President Herzog will be in Ankara on Wednesday. This is the first presidential visit since 2008. And also President Erdogan was in UAE. He's going to go soon to Saudi Arabia, then Egypt will come. And as far as I know, United Kingdom and United States are playing an important role in brokering this bigger deal, reconfiguring the Middle East, in which, and the Gulf, Turkey was excluded for a while, although it is the largest power to reckon with in the region, but it has been excluded from this, and there was an enmity between Turkey and most of the Gulf nations, except perhaps Oman and Qatar. So this is not a coincidence. It's part of the bigger picture where Turkey now will be placed in the region as a major player, together with Israel, perhaps. We'll be seeing a new Middle East. Then we have to see also what kind of new approaches European Union will have vis-a-vis Turkey. We know that this accession process has not worked. Turkey is excluded from this process. I'm not saying that Turkey will be admitted to EU right away, but if there is a new Cold War, a new dividing line, Turkey will have a better position, I think, to negotiate its access to European Union. Then relations with US is at the lowest ebb. Whether Biden and Erdogan will be able to repair it, I doubt it's going to happen in the foreseeable future. But if you want Turkey on the Western Cape, I think something has to be given to Turkey so that it will be incentivized while keeping relations with Russia, China, Iran, the West. So this required a very delicate management of foreign and security policies.
Absolutely. I mean, this is, I don't know how far off track we've got from the oil markets perhaps this morning, but it's all wrapped in together. I mean, we didn't even mention the fact that the US in the recent days or hours even were in meetings with Venezuela to try and look at what that can be done there. Clearly on the US doorstep, the world's biggest oil reserves in Venezuela. There's been reports overnight even that Biden may make a first state visit to Saudi Arabia, which of course would involve rehabilitating the relationship there with the Crown Prince. So a lot of things on the front line here. My own sense is on who will blink first. I think it'll be very difficult for the stable loving Chinese to ride the bronco that is Putin. That marriage seems to me a very difficult one where to sustain. The Chinese like that sense of predictable outcome. And yes, it would appear even at this stage that the Chinese were caught a little bit off guard on terms of the invasion and the scale of it. So yes, I'm not sure how long the Chinese will ride the bronco buck that is Putin. We'll have to see. Omar Najia, as always, awesome to have you Monday mornings. Mehmet, lovely to have you back. Thank you so much. And Victor, as always, great to have your insights from China. Every morning, 10:30 UAE time. Oil prices, as we said, trading just below 130 on Brent. Have a good day, everybody. All the best.
You too.